Hello, the Pioneer viewers. Today we're going to tell you about a turbulent situation in our neighboring country. The streets of Georgia are witnessing the harsh reactions of the people, and this time the target is a leader who is frequently mentioned in the world agenda, Vladimir Putin. The Georgian people are taking a stand against Russia's increasingly visible policies in the region and its role in the war in Ukraine. But these protests have not been limited to a mere protest or a symbolic response. Street demonstrations have turned into intense clashes, escalating tensions in different Georgian cities. Demonstrators are struggling to break through police barricades and continue to raise their voices against Putin with their slogans. But what is the real reason for this massive reaction and the angry crowds taking to the streets? What has mobilized the Georgian people so much, and are these demonstrations only a local movement, or do they carry a broader message? Moreover, there's talk that these developments will not be limited to Georgia, but will have a profound impact on other countries in the region and even on the international community. At the heart of this mobilization, which started in Georgia, is the reaction to Russia's aggressive policies in Ukraine. But this isn't limited to Ukraine. The Georgian people also believe that their independence is under threat. Russia's long-standing influence over Georgia, especially in the regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, is a fresh wound in the memory of the people. With the impact of this past, the Georgian people are once again reflecting their anger against Putin and their stance against the Kremlin's policies on the ground. The protests are not only a consequence of Russia's policies in the region, but also a serious message to the Georgian government. The people are questioning not only Russia's influence, but also their own government's stance against these policies. Anger against the government and demands for reforms have become one of the main arteries of the demonstrations. Let's take a closer look at the developments. Before we get into our report, a quick reminder: the Pioneer team is definitely real. None of my team members or me are artificial intelligence. Even though AI is extremely advanced, it's still not as good as us. By the way, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. We do read all the comments you leave on our videos, so please continue to share your ideas about our content. Tell us in the comments what content you'd like to see on the Pioneer channel. And now let us begin if you're ready. The Pioneer reports. Tensions are running high in Georgia as the streets of the capital, Tbilisi, are awash with public anger following the suspension of European Union membership talks until 2028. The ruling Georgian Dream Party has been accused of being pro-Russian, and its controversial decisions on the EU accession process has triggered widespread protests across the country. The demonstrations quickly went beyond a peaceful reaction and escalated into violent clashes with police. Allegations that the security forces were trying to suppress the demands for democratic rights became the #1 item on the agenda in Georgia. Although the protests were sparked by the decision to halt the European Union accession process, the country's crisis goes much deeper. The European Parliament's harsh criticism of Georgia's elections in recent months has reignited concerns about democratic backsliding and Russia's growing influence. In particular, the crackdown on opposition members and scandals such as bribery and double voting during the election process has strengthened the Georgian people's demands for justice and democracy. While EU officials have harshly criticized the Georgian government, the political crisis in the country is deepening. According to the Interior Ministry, 43 people have been detained so far. The independent news agency, Medusa, reported that police forces used water cannons, tear gas and pepper spray to disperse protesters. The protests became more chaotic on Thursday night. Crowds marched to the parliament building to make their demands known to the authorities inside. However, heavy interventions by police forces only served to increase public anger. Georgian Dream Party leader and Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhizadeh called the European Union's stance blackmail and defended the suspension of negotiations by emphasizing the independence of the government. However, these statements did not convince either the public or the international community. The Georgian Dream Party, which has long been criticized for establishing close ties with Russia, is accused of pursuing a policy that serves Vladimir Putin's interests in the region. The situation stands out as one of the main factors increasing the participation of the public in the demonstrations. Georgian President Salome Zorabishvili has taken the clearest stance against the harsh interventions against the demonstrations. Zorabishvili described the government's policies and the police crackdown on protesters as a war against the Georgian people. Zorabishvili described the suspension of the EU accession process as the result of a constitutional coup. Zorabishvili's question to the police reflected the public reaction. Do you serve Russia or Georgia? One of the main demands of the demonstrators is the complete end of Russia's influence over Georgia. The people believe that Georgia's future should be shaped under the umbrella of the European Union and that Russia's policies in the region are damaging this process. Any backward step towards the EU accession process is met with a strong public reaction. This resistance on the streets of Tbilisi is not only a popular movement, but also a challenge to the geopolitical balance in the South Caucasus. As people take to the streets to make their voices heard, they emphasize that this struggle has become a symbol not only for Georgia, but also for other countries in the region, such as Ukraine. As the European Parliament and other international organizations continue to put pressure on the Georgian government, it's certain that these protests will have both local and international repercussions in the long run. The fact that the protests pose a significant obstacle to Vladimir Putin's strategic calculations in the region increases the importance of the developments in Georgia. However, the direction in which events will evolve remains uncertain. The Georgian people's struggle for their democratic rights has the potential to inspire not only their own country, but also regional liberation movements. These events in Georgia have once again put the people's demand for democracy and freedom on the agenda of the world public opinion. The suspension of the EU membership process and the people's refusal to back down despite the pressure shows this struggle will continue for a long time. This resolute stance of the Georgian people could be an important turning point in the future of the South Caucasus. In the coming days, we'll see together what kind of results this resistance rising on the streets of Tbilisi will bring. What do you think? Do you think Putin will be affected by these protests? Is there a chance that Putin will take precautions against these protests? Will these protests affect the war in Ukraine? Let us know in the comments. We read and care about your opinions.